And first up, with the exemption of pension funds from the debt exchange program, the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry is asking government to rationalize its expenditure to make up for the 5% shortfall. Now, this advice follows an MOU signed between government through the Ministries of Employment and Labour Relations, Finance, and Organised Labour that pension funds would not be touched in the debt exchange program after fierce opposition from labour unions. Reacting to the development, President of the Chamber, Clement Osei-Amoako, said government can still do more by cutting down expenditure and reviewing its policy programs like the free SHS to save some cost and service its debts.
The side that we have to look at is that the gap created. How can government finance it, since it's part of the agreement and the policies that are put in place to be able to sustain our debt and allow IMF also to look into us and do a lot of businesses. I'm grateful for the government listening and taking that out of it. But we are looking at a situation where the government will have to come in and also contribute much to that, because we have been saying that so far the government's commitment to this debt restructuring have not been so encouraging. Over the years, and when we met, we have discussed that the ministerial numbers must be reduced, because the assumptions that they created to have those ministries might not be the same now, because we don't have the money to even allocate some funds to some ministries. And so either putting some together and eliminating some ministries for us in this hard time to be able to see our way through until we get back to our feet is something the government will have to look. Other waste areas where we also think that we can work on it, we expect the government to look at it. One other place that we have to look at, that the free education program is very important to Ghanaians. But I want to say that if other people want to pay the fees and have the money, they should be allowed to pay. The whole thing can be modified to look at people who really need and people who can pay. I think that we can make some savings there.
Meantime, economist Professor Lord Mensah is downplaying fears of economic shocks following the exemption of pension funds from the debt exchange program. It follows finance minister's warning that exempting the fund from the program will come with some cost to the economy. But Professor Mensah strongly disagrees with that warning. He has been speaking on PM Express Business Edition.
Reduction of debt does not necessarily mean that you should reduce it, drastically. You can spread it over years. Debt restructuring does not mean that you should hit a certain target within 5 years or within 6 years. Now, if you look at the structures that were provided by the finance minister, next year 0% interest payment. Why should next year be 0% interest payment? We can find a way to build up the interest, come up with the interest a bit. The following year, 5%. Why should it be 5%? So in a way, I mean, government can, come in. That is why I made a statement earlier that what is the government exchanging for this, debt exchange?
Yeah.
What the government can exchange for this exchange is the sacrifice of some budget lines and then making room for the losses they're making now on the interest payment or the interest savings they want to make on pensions. So effectively, if you take, for instance, I mentioned capital expenditure earlier. Capital expenditure, we can sacrifice. These are discretionary expenditures. Goods and services, these are also, we have control over it. Other expenditure, we have control over all these expenditure lines, which we can make room to fill in the losses that we're going to make from the interest savings we could have made from, these pensions and individual investments.
So it's a no-no for you when the argument is made that, listen, if we are freeing these things or exempting these things, pension funds and individuals, it will come at a cost to us.
Oh, it won't be that much of a cost. It's about prioritizing your expenditure lines and then realigning what was presented in Parliament.
All right, a government appears to have failed to convince organized labor to carry out the debt exchange program. And joining us on Zoom is Professor Williams Pepra, who is Associate Professor of Finance at the Andrews University. Grateful for your time. And so organized labor seems to have won. The debt exchange program is going to go on without pension funds being touched. Your reaction to this, really? Can you hear me, Prof?
Yeah, I can hear you. Daryl, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you for calling me. It's good that probably labor union, they have won their case to get the pension funds excluded. As the finance minister has indicated, it may come with some costs, and indeed, yes. If I look at the approach that was adopted by the finance minister in the debt restructuring policies, he wanted to achieve what is termed as decisive debt restructuring. That is, making sure that straight away Ghana get to a point where we are at 55% of debt GDP, then 18% of total revenue in terms of payment to external debt. Excluding the pension funds mean that this will not be able, we cannot achieve this strategy. So Ghana will move into what is termed as interim debt restructuring. The cost implication is that in the next 2 years, there is a high probability or likelihood that Ghana will visit another debt restructuring program again because of the lack of space which has not been able to attain from this particular process. The other implication in terms of cost is that labor union, they have won their case. Are we also going to see agitation from other bodies which may compel government to also listen to them and give in like this? So these are the measures and the challenges that government seems to face at this particular point in time.
Well, the finance minister says the exemption of the pension funds will come with a cost to the economy. How significant would that impact be?
I mean, the cost that will come is that government probably may be looking at its current budget and to create space. One of them, which is a major line item, will be either emolument or capital expenditure items. Any of this that will be touched in the current budget to create space to be able to pay the interest on these pension fund bonds is going to affect the economy. So if government to decide that the 25 billion earmarked for capital expenditure is going to, some of that money will be going to be used to pay interest accruing on pension funds, it means that that project or capital expenditure is going to suffer. Likewise, if government decide to use the emolument, means that labor will not be able to get the salary increment they are anticipating. And these are the two major lines that, to me, I think that government may decide to touch. On the issue of the social policies, even IMF gives government room to still continue to provide social assistance to the citizenry in times of in time of this. So we cannot talk of the free SHS program, which is a major program agenda by government, and it's something that possibly the president will be remembered for. So it will be very difficult to touch it now, if anything.
Well, you had the president of the Ghana National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Clement Osei, could talk about what government can do to make up for the funds that we are losing because the pension funds have been exempted from the program. What alternatives does the government have? For instance, has reviewed the free SHS, has to cut down on the size of the government. What would you do if you're in the shoes of the government?
Okay, so these measures are available for government to review its budget expenditures. But in government, as it looks at that, sometimes they find it very difficult. And we shouldn't forget that they are political entities. So as they take these decisions, they also look out for how would they be able, what can they do to be able to also win the heart of Ghanaians back in the next election. So we must be very careful on that line. There is another alternative for government in approaching IMF. In 1989, the IMF adopted lending into arrears policy. Lending into arrears policy means that if a government or a country is having difficulty in negotiating with its creditors, like what is happening now, that all creditors are still demanding their pound of flesh or their interest payment. IMF, if government approaches IMF on lending into arrears policy, IMF will grant Ghana government that option. But what it simply means is that Ghana is going to default on some interest payments because of that policy. It's like Ghana is going to accept that we will pay our creditors based on availability of funds. So we would default in arrears and tell our creditors that, well, we when we have money, we will pay you. So something like that is going to happen to the pension fund arrangement. When it gets to the time of coupon payment or interest payment on the bonds, and the government does not have money, they will do a book accounting. It's called accrual to only recognize it in the books. But in terms of real cash, there will be no cash movement because the liquidity challenges. If government or the finance minister adopt this approach, he'll be able to get IMF accepting and granting Ghana government what we need, but then we will accept default. It has an impact on the government in terms of branding, because once you default, you will probably suffer, you may have some major challenges coming back into the capital market. The way the agreement to grant the pension funds exempted means that by 2028, Ghana will still not be able to achieve at 55% to debt GDP. So definitely Ghana's best approach to IMF is go through the lending into arrears process. This was done in 1989, and a similar situation is what we are having currently in the global. So there are some countries who are looking at this particular option. They can go to IMF through the lending to arrears.
Yeah, and I guess the worry when the organized labor was protesting the government touching pension funds was that this would delay an IMF program. I don't know what this means for an IMF program going forward. Is the deal shaky? I mean, what's going to happen next?
I mean, so Ghana government, let me put it, IMF probably wants Ghana to demonstrate that your creditors have agreed or given you some room to achieve a debt sustainability level. And from the way things are going, Ghana will not be able to achieve it if we, as we are keeping the pension fund. We'll be able to achieve it if we, between 2028. So it's probably going to delay government in getting the IMF approval on this particular deal. But the alternative for government is to use the approach that I've spoken about, which is called lending into arrears policy. IMF allowed it in 1989. So the finance minister may consider that option when he meets the IMF and say, can you allow us, because we are having difficulty getting our creditors to accept what we are proposing.
One last question. We just have a minute. We've got two rating agencies downgrading Ghana's creditworthiness, the latest being Fitch. We expected it, but here's what has caught our attention. Fitch giving indication of a further downgrade of our credit rating to deeper junk status. What would that mean?
I mean, it's getting worse by the day. When government announced that it's suspending interest or coupon payments on existing Euro bonds, it gives a signal of default. And the implication is that Ghana is probably going to really struggle to get into the international market. The positive side that we can also pick is that all creditors are now warned by these downgrades that you may cut your losses and get what you can from Ghana government before it really gets bad. And once it's like that, Ghana may be able to achieve a debt restructuring strategy with these external entities. So the bad side is that it puts us in a very difficult situation. But the positive side is that it helps us to also negotiate with with our external creditors.
All right. Thank you so much, Associate Professor of Finance at the Andrews University, Professor Williams Wipra there. Appreciate your time. You're watching The Marketplace. We are taking a short break. We've got plenty of news coming up. Do stay tuned. And welcome back to The Marketplace. Former Trade and Industry Minister Dr. Gov't has called for the creation of a price and income board to help stabilize prices of goods as the city makes gains. Speaking to Joy Business at the funeral of Ghana's longest-serving finance minister, Kwesi Botwe, Dr. Gov't criticized the Bank of Ghana over the unstable exchange rate regime. He says the central bank should come clean with the current happenings on the market.
The former Trade and Industry Minister at the late Professor Kwesi Botwe's funeral bemoaned a consistent increase in public debt. He said authorities should act devoid of political affiliations.
You ask anybody who is trading in the financial markets, the truth is that the cedi, the real value of the cedi is how much it costs you to buy $1. And so the artificial differences that we are hearing, that you can get $1 for 8 cedis, 9 cedis, it's not possible. If you talk to people really changing money, it's more like bring 12 cedis, I'll give you $1. 12.50, I'll give you $1. So that is where the dollar's value really is, and therefore the city's own value too. So we should stop playing games and gymnastics with each other. People's lives are at stake. People are dying in hospitals because of their inability to pay their hospital bills. And all of us who are going to the marketplaces, our families and wives, our children, are struggling to buy food at normal prices. Almost all things the prices have increased exponentially. And there are countries which have stabilized their prices. So we used to have a price and incomes board or another kinds of price control institutions, both for rentals, and for prices. And I think it's time to bring back some of those institutions and learn what worked well with those institutions that are supposed to control or influence prices, and those what did not work so well. So we don't go and reinvent the wheel and bring back the bad aspects of those things. But
he, however, eulogized the late Kwesi Botwe, describing him as a public servant who fought for financial freedom.
I met Professor Botwe at the University of Ghana campus when I was a student, and he was already a lecturer, so he was my senior by far. But we gained our friendship through our commitment to what we'll call left-of-center ideology, socialist thinking. And so he groomed some of us who were socialist-minded and who were also in Krumais, because I was a young pioneer, to also follow in that thinking.
Now, if you plan on giving your loved ones a hamper this festive season, you would have to increase your budget as cost has shot up significantly. Now, some traders at the Central Business District of Accra say the situation has affected the purchase of their hampers. Beverly Broom visited the market and comes through with this report.
First day of Christmas, my true love sent to me a partridge. We are a few days to Christmas, yet trading activities at the Central Business District in Accra are yet to pick up. According to some traders, the high cost of items is deterring customers from purchasing their goods.
Okay, we're packaging this for around 350, but this time, even the 220 that we have here, last year we packaged around 150 to 120, but this year is 250, 220. And even the 220, we don't have much things in it because the rice is expensive, oil, then biscuits. But we just have to do something because some people would like to give someone something, but the money is not there. So we just have to try and package something a bit that you can give out. You can give out to someone.
They are buying slowly, but they will come. By all means, this one is 200, 25, 500 to 300. Previously, the hampers, the highest is 400. But this one, because of, that's why it has increased a little. Next week by this time, when you come, you will see it. They will come and buy it, surely. They will buy it.
Woven baskets, an essential item used in making these hampers, has relatively dropped in demand due to the current economic challenges. A visit to some basket weaving hubs in Accra revealed that the current economic hardship has had a great impact on the materials for weaving, which in effect has affected the production of these baskets this year. Osei has been in the trade for the past 6 years.
I am aware that the government occasionally issues directives prohibiting the purchase of hampers. Individuals and businesses, however, do buy them. Customers who usually come in to buy in bulk have requested a smaller order this year. I believe it is due to an increase in item prices. We anticipated that as fuel prices fell, so will the prices of other items. But we are hoping for better things next year.
Despite the low patronage of these items, some traders in the Central Business District have adopted a new strategy to reach wider consumers. Madame Ekuya, until this festive season, was trading in combs, brushes and other items, but has switched to selling Christmas souvenirs.
I used to sell combs, pegs and other small items. But now that Christmas is approaching, I have shifted to selling Christmas decorations. Items are becoming more expensive, and some customers are fleeing when they hear the prices. Those who comprehend the market, on the other hand, purchase. Something needs to be done to improve the situation so that we can all have a happy Christmas.
Thanks for watching. More news on our website, myjoyonline.com. And Merry Christmas. Goodbye.